on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
What does it mean to restore something? Grasses are the key to water it, but grasses are really the key to soil health.
You guys are really encouraging incredible biodiversity here.
He found an architect that was just as crazy as him, and then they built the world's first and largest man-made bat cave.
You're the only person who's ever sent me a text, hey, I'll be down in a few minutes, I just got to put a few backpacks on these lizards first.
Before I die, I think we will all be in a shock when we see flying foxes and fruit bats reclassified as primates.
When you see wild hog on a menu, it's because they've been trapped and then brought to USDA slaughterhouses, and then they can enter the food market.
They are a cosmopolitan species. They just kind of do well wherever. Before you know it, it's hog heaven.
Jared, I'm falling in love with Texas.
Conservation's like an onion. There's a lot of layers to it. The biggest and most important layer is it's not free.
Episode 98 of the WildFed podcast, Restoring the Landscape with Jared Holmes, is brought to you by Surthrival. When I started Surthrival back in 2008, my goal was to create a supplement line devoted to the world I believed was coming. One where immune systems would be challenged, hormone levels would be stymied, and our ability to adapt would be limited by the chemical and electromagnetic pollution that was becoming our constant. And I believed that nature held the answers. One of the first product lines I developed was our medicinal mushroom dual extracts. Medicinal mushrooms like reishi and chaga have both been shown again and again in scientific studies to be powerful adaptogens and immune system modulators. They help your body adapt to the changing health landscape and fortify your immune system against new and existing threats. In fact, their beta-glucans, complex, non-sweet, non-glycemic sugar molecules, make your immune system more intelligent, improving your white blood cells' abilities to clean up unwanted biological intruders and your body's own wayward cells. Surthrival's chaga is made from wild chaga mushrooms, and Surthrival's reishi is made from organic wood-grown fruit bodies. Both are extracted in alcohol and hot water for a full-spectrum product like no other on the market. Right now, all through September at surthrival.com, our reishi and chaga mushroom dual extracts are 20% off with the coupon code ADAPTNOW. Head over to surthrival.com and use the coupon code ADAPTNOW for 20% off all mushroom products at Surthrival. If you're drawn to hunting as a rite of passage, go check out sacredhunting.com. There's so many new or potential hunters who want to develop ancestral skills and intimate relationships with wild animals in the landscape, but who aren't drawn to the commercialization of modern hunting culture. Sacredhunting.com and its founder, Monsell Denton, are different. Sacred Hunting provides a space for new hunters to learn to stalk, harvest, and field dress animals in conjunction with earth-based ceremonies that introduce you to hunting in a more intentional and spiritually connected way. Monsell and his team will guide you through beginner hunts, and more advanced hunters will find unique opportunities available across the country and globe, like access deer hunts on Molokai in Hawaii, and even a northern Siberia hunt with the Nenets people coming up in 2022. There's only a few spots available on each hunt, so go to sacredhunting.com and complete their 2-minute application. Discounts are available if you let them know you heard about them on the WildFed podcast. Again, go to sacredhunting.com and learn more about Monsell and Sacred Hunting on episode 59 of the WildFed podcast. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. I've just returned from a week in the beautiful hill country of Central Texas, filming an episode for season 2 of WildFed, the TV show that is, on Outdoor Channel. Our host and guide to the incredible property we visited was Jared Holmes, a zoologist, herpatologist, hunter, butcher, ecological steward, and landscape regeneration specialist. I could go on, but instead, I'll let him speak for himself in this excellent interview. As you'll hear, we became fast friends, which was a fantastic bonus to what was already an inspiring and restorative trip to one of the most incredible properties I've ever visited. We hunted and foraged on a landscape that's been restored on a scale that's a bit bigger than anything I've seen before. 9 square miles of dry, scrubby, overgrazed, juniper-choked land is now, once again, grassland savanna with rich soil, flowing springs and creeks, tremendous biodiversity, and a stock of free-ranging game that staggers my New England sensibilities. This place, the Bamberger Ranch, serves as a model of what's possible with good stewardship, despite the incredible insults to the land that have been perpetrated here over the last several hundred years. I came home from the ranch with a lot of feral hog meat, and just 2 nights ago I braised one of the hams for my wife Ivani and I. We were simply blown away by the quality of the meat. I've had wild hog before, and I've enjoyed it, but not like this. Ivani confided that she really didn't like the wild pork I'd brought home before. This meat tastes so clean and healthy to me, she said, and I have to agree there's something sweeter and more succulent going on. This wouldn't be a surprise with plants. Of course, you'd expect tomatoes or cucumbers to be sweeter and juicier on good, healthy, intact soil than on a degraded landscape. So why wouldn't meat be the same? These hogs have been living in an intact eco-community with mineralized soil, clean spring water, and feeding on a diversity of healthy wild foods. They're simply healthier hogs, and their meat reflects that. Extrapolate that out to the quality of your own life. Are you getting exposed to quality soil and water? To foods grown in healthy ecological communities? Are you getting to soak in springs, to breathe in the forest air, to be touched by the healing rays of the sun and the cooling ionic breeze of an intact ecosystem? If not, this could become your goal, at least some of the time. It's certainly your birthright and a biological imperative. But like landscape regeneration, it won't just happen to you. You'll have to put the work in. You'll have to seek it out. Point yourself in the direction you want to go. Healthier, more fulfilled. Jared's living, working, and raising a family in a little slice of paradise. But the thing is, the whole earth is ready for this kind of regeneration. We just have to get to work. I'll leave it to Jared to tell you how. Oh, and I almost forgot. Season 1 of the WildFed TV show is now streaming on myoutdoortv.com. You can get a free week and binge all 10 episodes at no cost, or hang on to the membership and have access to the whole suite of content there. I hope you'll check us out and stay tuned for Season 2, which should start airing right around the new year, where you'll see the Bamberger Ranch itself, meet Jared face-to-face, and see the incredible episode we just made there.
Jared Holmes, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And we got Grant Giuliano over here.
Hey, guys.
Fresh back from a near-death experience, which we'll get to. Jared, I'm falling in love with Texas.
Yeah, man, it's a really special place. It's all the Californians can stay in California, but you Mainers are welcome down here, at least for a little bit. I know a true summer, you guys would have been destroyed with the heat. You're getting some of that today.
And you're not going to have a big migration of Mainers, but you might be getting one from California. I do have a caveat, which is that these are two things that they don't take away from my love for this place, but I do need to say them. One, it is just straight hot here. It's really hot. We deal with a lot of heat in Maine in the summer, but man, I don't know what it is. I'm like, it's not the humidity. We have humidity. It's not the temperatures. We have high temperatures, but it's been getting to me.
But we've been here. Well, it's cool, you say.
Yeah. This has
but
been a very mild
90s.
August.
What, we probably have had highs of 91 while we're here?
Yeah, well, today it's going to be 100. Tomorrow it's going to be 100. So
yeah, it's hot.
Yeah. So it's clear to me that you guys deal with an extreme of heat that's comparable to the extreme of cold that we have up in Maine. And then the other thing, though, is that everything here on the landscape is like bitey, pokey, sticky, prickly, itchy, scratchy, and generally kind of uncomfortable. And I am dealing with for the first time with chigger bites. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of scratched a lot of them raw. So I'm very uncomfortable all over today from that.
There's always something going
and then you immediately go into flashbacks.
Yeah. So tell us about Texas Hill Country. What is this kind of ecotone?
Yeah, ecotone. There we go. Yeah, so Texas is a super diverse state, right? And you have, with it being one of the largest states we have, it's bigger than France, to put that in context. And
wow.
Yeah, so you've got savannas all over the place, and then you have these like transitional zones. So we go from like post oak into a savanna into where we are now, this kind of live oak juniper savanna.
Does the post oak create canopy, or is it?
Oh yeah, it's a forest. Yeah, it's a forest. It's because East Texas, there's swamps, there's rivers. I mean, it's completely different than what you're seeing here. And then as you keep going down south, you get into scrubland. We call it thorn scrub. You know, Grant, you'd really like it out there. There's a lot of bees, a lot of wasps, and a lot of cactus and mesquite and weesach and cat's claw and, you know, names that want to hurt you. So, yeah, and then at that point, you're basically in Mexico. And then the western side of the state becomes the Chihuahuan Desert.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really diverse. There's 6-ish ecoregions that they've identified.
Okay.
It kind of depends on who you talk to. Like
Right.
Gould's, the Parks and Wildlife kind of recognizes 6 main ones. And the one we are right now is called the Edwards Plateau. So this was raised up a couple 100 million years ago. And all of this was a mesa before weathering and erosion happened.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay. And the altitude we are looking at the hilltops here around us would be about what?
1,900 feet.
What's so cool is like I'm finding fully intact shells from sea creatures just coming out of the hillsides, and they're not uncommon or rare. It's not like, oh, wow, preserve that. It's like they're falling out of everything. All this limestone is like giving up all of these shells and fossils. So this was obviously all underwater.
Oh, yeah. At one point, you know, in the mid-Cretaceous period, where we are right now, there's a state natural area called Enchanted Rock, about an hour and a half from where we are now. And that would have been this volcanic island. And then the Bamberger Ranch would have been a small island in that chain.
Okay.
So this would very much had a sediment, mud flat feel to it during the tidal transitions.
So would any of it have been above water, or was
at different
points,
times of
but
the
at
day.
some point the entire thing would have been submerged?
Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so this is like down in South Texas, for those people who are familiar with it, it's like Laguna Madre. You know, it's just like always, your feet are always sticky.
Yeah.
You know, like be careful what shoes you have on. You don't want them to get stuck and left behind. You know? So, yeah, I mean, the mid-Cretaceous period was very interesting. You know, because you saw our dinosaur tracks, right?
Yeah.
And so,
which were not at like a low point in the ranch. They're actually at a high point in the ranch.
Yeah, exactly.
So cool.
Yeah, it really is. And like, you know, with the seashells, I mean, our roads are made out of fossils. You know, it's that deposit.
Yeah.
And so we have oyster reefs. We've got clams and snails. We have all that stuff that lived in the muck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've had a few trackers on the show to talk about the art of tracking, which is, you know, such an ancient human art that some people think it was very formative to how our brains are built and to our perception of time, past, present, future, to the formation of language and things we would have been communicating about. So I'm interested as just a sort of tertiary side interest. I'm interested in the idea of tracking and getting to track dinosaurs from how old are those tracks estimated?
About 100 million years.
I mean, getting to look at 100-million-year-old tracks and think about, I remember you standing, what was the animal?
The Acrocanthosaurus.
Which is a pretty vicious looking, you know, to the eye, like somewhere between a velociraptor and a T-Rex or something, right? Kind of like a gnarly bipedal,
exactly. I mean,
toothy guy.
Just a smaller T-Rex.
Small T-Rex.
Yeah.
So you stood in it and did the stride, and that's like tracking, right? It's like part of tracking is you can build up from the tracks estimates of the size of the animal, what direction it's going, and all of that. And being able to do that with something from 100 million years ago is really kind of mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, and then once you kind of see the tracks and you walk through it, you kind of like have to try to picture what the landscape looked like. And then, you know, because that's so high, now it's covered in trees, it's really difficult to, like, you actually have to take your mind and put it somewhere back. You have to use your imagination because there's no photographs from the Cretaceous period, you know. And even when you look at posters and artist representations, it's always like, but was it?
Yeah, made up.
Yeah, like, was it?
Imagined.
And I mean, that's our best guess, but still,
even when we look
it?
at the skins of dinosaurs, you know, it's like we don't know what they really looked like, and a lot of speculation about what their scales would be like, what colors would they be, you know. We're all very influenced by Jurassic Park, I think, now, right?
Yeah,
the way we've seen dinosaurs move in such lifelike ways. But I want to get to talking about Bamberger Ranch, where we are right now, because this is such a special and unique place. But let's start with you, man. It's been awesome to hang out with you all week. So we're here filming for season 2 of WildFed, and you've been our host, our guide, our friend. I feel like we've developed a great friendship, so this has been awesome, a really good rapport. You've been the guy who kind of knows what everything is, so that's been fun. So tour guide Jared would be like, you know, you're somebody I can be like, what's this? What's this? What's this? And, Usually you'll know the scientific name. If you don't, you've got a common name for me at least. And but most of the time, you've got pretty good knowledge on just about every single thing we've pointed at, which is, for me, I'm that kind of guy who wants to know all those things. It's so useful. So yeah, you've been brilliant. You hunt, you cook, you got kind of a really broad skill set. You taught me some fantastic butchering skills, or breakdown skills. And yeah, overall, you've been just a great guy to hang out with. Give us a little backstory, man. Maybe start with your education, because you've definitely got a good background.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we'll start before college. I grew up in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, and my father was a biologist, and so my brothers and my sister, we were his field techs when he was out in the field. So I had this.
How many of you?
Let's see here, 2 brothers and a sister. So
Okay.
What is that, 4?
4.
I'm an Aggie, so my math isn't that good. So yeah, the 4 of us would pile in our 1987 Astro van and just drive all over the place. And I really fell in love with being in the field, and I absolutely fell in love with reptiles and amphibians. I mean, like, we just called it snake hunting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I graduated from high school, it came time to choose university. And I have wanderlust. I don't like to be, I didn't want to be in Pennsylvania. The area was beautiful where I grew up, but I wanted something different. And so I started looking at all these different universities, and then I was going to go to the University of Texas there in Austin. And when I drove down and did all my site visits, there's just something about the city I can't breathe, man.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at the whole 6th Street and the music scene,
Yeah.
and I really like, rhythm and blues, and like, ooh, I don't know that I ever would have gone to class.
Right.
And so then I went over to A&M, and I was like, wait, I can go like look at turtles and catch snakes on campus?
Yeah.
Like, this is pretty cool. And, there's parks all around there. And so I could be in a national forest in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So it was really ideal for me. And so when I finished up from A&M, I tried the whole grad school thing, and it just didn't work out. I did a whole, PhD, MD program down in Galveston. It didn't suit me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I left, and I said, all right, I'm going to go be a dirtbag biologist. And I just started taking field tech jobs all over the place. And
What kind of things did you work on?
lizards and snakes, mostly like tracking, throwing radios on them and seeing where they're going, or presence, absence, just surveying.
Yeah, you're the only person who's ever sent me a text like, hey, I'll be down in a few minutes. I just got to put a few backpacks on these lizards first.
It's not code. You saw the picture. That's actually what we did.
You were actually doing that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I had the pleasure of meeting the late, great Margaret Bamberger here in Johnson City. My parents had just moved to Blanco, and I've been poking around, and they were running what you saw down at the lake, the rain machine, this little educational demonstration, and I hadn't spent a whole lot of time in the hill country. And so,
Describe that real quick, that rain machine, and what you guys, because kids come out here for educational purposes.
Yeah, so the rain machine basically simulates a rainfall event. We're in flash flood alley right now, right? And so we're simulating not a nice, gentle Irish rain, one of those big flooding events.
Like the one that happened when we were in the tree stand the other day.
Yeah, exactly. 0.8 of an inch in a half hour. I mean, just to put that in context. And so the rain machine simulates this juniper forest, a native grassland, and then we have another side that we run for the kids that has a mowed lawn, and we put green food coloring on that to simulate fertilizer.
These are like trays that are like a foot by a foot or
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
And each one is a different one of these little miniature
Yep.
landscapes.
Yep.
Okay, and you pour water through them basically.
And then the water's got 2 different pathways it can take. It's the surface runoff, and then the water that could potentially get into the aquifer, which what we would call drinking water or spring water here, as you know. And so when we run that demonstration, it really kind of shows people the power of grass and the power of soil health. When you have healthy soil, you can grow things like grass. And what the juniper is kind of a misunderstood thing here in Central Texas, and so many people have overgrazed, with the post-Civil War expansion of the American Southwest. I mean, grasslands have just been decimated, and the areas that still had soil were forests. So all these creeks and rivers historically would have been heavily forested, We had ocelots and jaguars and black bears running around.
Wow.
You know, I mean, it's less than 100 years ago. There was a jaguar 40-something miles from here.
Wow.
Like, that's just nuts to think about.
And the forest at that time was a mix of trees like we're seeing now.
Yeah.
Now, would it be fair? We had a camera guy out here with us, Mike, who was just fantastic to have around. So hi, Mike, if you're listening. And the first question he asked me when he got here is, where's all the junipers?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, because now that I drove out of the ranch the other day to go into Blanco.
That's how the locals say it. Yeah.
So I went into Blanco, and I could see as I was driving out on the roads, huge areas choked out by junipers.
Yeah.
But I thought to myself, if I didn't know, I might think that's the natural landscape here. So that's kind of a question of mine. Do people perceive that very often to be a natural, I mean, I know it's natural, but to be sort of the baseline of this environment?
I think historically, people nowadays have to have that as their baseline because there's so much of it, right? And then they hear the story about the Bamberger Ranch, or they hear a story about this other habitat restoration. But when you read the early accounts of the European settlers and the accounts of the Texas Rangers, even in the 1800s, they talk about these seas of grass. Grass is 6 and 7 feet tall. Their horses were afraid to walk through it, and not just because the Comanches might be in that sea of grass waiting for them. But then they also talk about these areas down by the creek where they can see the water, but they can't get their horses through the thicket, what you saw earlier today at the front of the ranch. And so that thicket then transitions to what we would consider now like an old growth. So you would have these ginormous junipers, which you saw. We still have a lot of juniper out here. But what we don't have is a lot of that young age class, that real scrubby. You know, we'll never get a cedar break back. And cedar breaks, I mean, you're talking those massive trees, but a forest of those massive trees.
That's called a cedar break.
A cedar break, yeah.
So juniper and cedar here are common names that are interchangeable.
Synonymous. Sometimes it's called mountain cedar. Juniper is ashii. It's all the same species, you know. So you also hear stories about how during the Ranger Wars with the Comanches could bolt into the cedar break and just get away because there's grass, there's shrubs, and then you have these just massive junipers.
Like what we saw down in what you guys call Turkey Hollow.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so that's a restored juniper break versus these juniper sort of monoculture areas that are more common in this part of the state.
Yeah, so we would call that monoculture a thicket, cedar thicket.
Oh, okay.
And one of the nice things about those cedar thickets, I mean, so Mr. Bamberger set out to buy the worst piece of property he could find in 1969 for two reasons. One, it was cheap. And two, he read a book called Pleasant Valley, and that book was the first time that habitat and restoration, to our knowledge, was put together.
What kind of year are we talking now?
We're talking Dust Bowl era, so 30s.
That book's written in the 30s.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bamberger finds it.
I mean, he grew up not too far from Malabar Farms, which is a state park in Ohio. And so Mr. Bamberger probably found that when he was 12, 13 years old, you know, so during his formidable years, right? And he always kind of kept that in his brain,
that idea of restoring the landscape.
Yeah. And he grew up without means, and when he was able, when Church's Fried Chicken went public, he sold fried chicken to become an overnight millionaire, and he bought the first 3,000 acres here in May of 1969.
Wow.
Yeah, and what he bought was what most of the hill country looks like now.
Cedar thickets, yeah,
and all the water that you've seen here. We had the headwaters to Miller Creek. It wasn't here.
Right. So for listeners, we're on right now, this ranch is currently about 9 square miles.
Yeah, just under. It's 5,500 acres.
It's incredible.
Contiguous.
And it is truly stunning. And one of the most amazing things about it is all this water here. Yeah. I mean, there's, that beautiful lake that we swam in. There's the pool that we swam in, Jacob's Ladder, which is just one of my favorite spots on the property. There's creeks running all through the property, and probably the coolest thing for me has been there's spring water gravity fed into the cabin we're staying in, and most of the structures on the property, right? So we've been showering and drinking that same spring water that we're seeing on the property, which I guess kind of brings us back to you were talking about showing the kids the rain machine.
Yeah.
Because that's a little microcosmic view of the work you guys have been doing on the 9 square mile scale here on the ranch, huh?
Exactly, yeah. So that rain machine really demonstrates what Mr. Bamberger did. It shows you what the rain was doing when it was a cedar monoculture, and what happened as
You're
it
having
got
surface
yeah,
runoff, basically.
right. Surface runoff and very, very little recharge. It does recharge. It's just not a whole lot.
Much. You
right?
showed me by digging in the duff there on the forest floor just how thick it was with sort of sterile, barely decomposing cedar leaves.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean? What do you mean by recharge?
So recharge. So think of so you've been all over what I like to call our landscape sponge, right? And you've seen that porous rock that's called Edwards limestone. And that rock is when you have grass on top of it and you don't have a cedar monoculture, that rock allows water to go through it, and then it hits this bedrock layer, that this fireplace and everything's made out of. And that's an impermeable surface, so it doesn't get through there. So then that water backs up. So every time it rains, if you have a grassland or a well-managed forest, not just a cedar monoculture, the water backs up, gets a little deeper, gets a little wider, and eventually that becomes full. And then you've all been at the bottom of a lake or a swimming pool. That pressure you feel, that water feels that same pressure, and it's got to come out. And it comes out for us in the form of springs. So which is pretty epic to experience that,
Yeah, one of the slogans I've seen around the property is water from stone.
Yeah. So we have Mr. Bamberger had a book written about him and his restoration by Jeffrey Green called Water from Stone. And then a filmmaker, Ben Masters, did a short documentary also called Water from Stone. And National Geographic picked that up, and it's got something like 4.5 million views on whatever YouTube or something. So,
and the impression I've had here is that while this project, which is now played out over how long of a period of time?
We're over 50 years. So 1969. Okay. So what is that? Again, math. Is that 53?
Yeah. Okay, right. That sounds about right. No, 53, 52?
52. There we go.
So while this project is worthwhile on its own, correct me if I'm wrong, my impression is it stands as a model for other projects eventually, with the hopes that the world would embrace this kind of restoration thinking. And also, maybe I could get you, maybe there's a Bamberger perspective and then maybe your own personal perspective too, if they're not the same. Sometimes when people talk about restoration, things get a little dicey. They'll be like, well, when? Like, are you talking 1491? The people who lived here before were also altering the landscape in very significant ways with fire and tree management and plant stands of plants were being managed. And so it's sort of like, when is your, like, that was the right time? So how do you kind of look at that whole thing, and how does the ranch look at that whole thing, and what do you mean by restoring?
Yeah, so something we always tell the kids is what does it mean to restore something, right? And it basically just means to make new again, or to get as close to new or your baseline.
Refresh.
Yeah, as you want. And one thing that Mr. Bamberger has been very aware of from the start, and all of the current staff out here right now are very aware of, is we can't go back 100 million years to the mid-Cretaceous period. This isn't the mid-seaway anymore. Right? The Rocky Mountains kind of, formed and got in the way of that. And so then you have to just start like rewinding and going, okay, well, we're never going to get black bears back here again because so much of Texas is privately owned and they probably don't want black bears. We're not going to get jaguars back here again because we don't have the habitat. And again, people,
aren't going to be very open to that.
Yeah. And so you kind of just have to like put everything in context, and then just like Mr. Bamberger did, he just started reading books, and there was no Bamberger Ranch to serve as this model. And so our philosophy is we write 5-year plans in pencil, and we're constantly updating them. So that 5-year plan is essentially a 10, 15,
living
20.
document.
It's a living, breathing document. That's exactly right. And you have to see how the land responds. And so this cedar thicket didn't happen overnight. You're talking a century of overgrazing and land abuse. It's not going to change. It's not going to look like the Bamberger Ranch overnight, right? I mean, this is 50 years. So we don't say we're restored. We say we're a habitat restoration in progress even now, right?
Right.
Because you saw how much land management we still do out here. I mean, we have to stay on top of it. We might end up a juniper forest again. And who knows how the climate is going to work, with apparently getting hotter and drier. And I think people see this year and they get really confused. And so here in the hill country too, we have this weird cycle. We have this drought cycle. And so we go through these 4-year periods of low rainfall, and then 2-year periods of high rainfall. And then outside of that, it's like a constant snap drought. It'll rain in May or June, and then the hoses shut off until September, October. So this year's been really, really strange, for that. And so when you're thinking about your habitat restoration too, like what's the weather doing? And it's not feasible to go back to 1491. We're not having herds of hundreds of thousands of bison migrate through this area anymore. We don't have mule deer and pronghorns running through here. I mean, the hill country, this part of the plateau, would have been a seasonal hunting camp anyway for most of the First Peoples.
It would have been, I mean, because you took me up to an archaeological site on the property where that midden, it was inhabited over thousands of years continuously. You can tell by the different industries. And by industries, I mean the different stone tool technologies that are present there in layers, right?
Yeah. And that's really cool too, to be able to, have the kids go in there and dig through that and just go, oh, that's a Mondale point. That's a Pedernales point. That doesn't mean anything to them. But then the people that are listening to this are like, what, really? And it's like, like, and you can see the fluting and you can see the work on that. It's just, when you pick that up, you're like, did this pierce a bison? Did this kill a mastodon? Like, oh.
Even if it was just flakes discarded by somebody, it's so cool. Just the idea that a human being was sitting there working on, this morning I was cleaning one of my rifles because that rainstorm that came, so I had rust forming in my barrel, just surface rust, and Mike brought me a rifle cleaning kit, so I was just running that through the bore. And to me, that sitting there doing that is very similar to sitting there napping a stone 5,000 years ago or something. It's just like working on your weapon, your hunting tools or whatever. And even though it's all changed so much, the technology and the look of it, the kind of spirit of the thing remains the same. And it's just really neat that this place, because we haven't even started talking about the wildlife here, which is just incredible. But real quickly, going back to the restoration thing, another big piece of what you guys are doing here seems to be, in some ways, I know the word restoration is used, but in some ways it's less about trying to bring it back to something so specific as much as you guys are really encouraging incredible biodiversity here.
Yeah, the Hill Country region is a really important biologically diverse region in North America, not just Texas. Some scientists out there call it the 8th richest in terms of species in the entire country. That's pretty amazing, right? I mean, we've got species here that don't occur anywhere else. All the spring salamanders that we have here, which are highly endangered, with the karst that we have and the perched aquifers, like that's what we're dealing with. Karst would be like the caves, caverns. It's the underground rock formations, right? And so at one point we had, blind catfish and stuff living in there. And the water connectivity in Texas is insane, right? And so because there's so many rivers and creeks that are here, like when you think about jaguars and bears, like that's because there was so much food here. And one thing we know, again, going back to what Mr. Bamberger learned at the first part of the restoration, was grasses are the key. Grasses are the key to water, but grasses are really the key to soil health, because they're storing all that carbon underneath the ground.
In the form of their root mass.
In the form of the root mass, right? And so that's every time it rains, that water is able to infiltrate there. And
it's like
rainwater,
riding those roots right down deep into the soil.
Yeah, and so that rainwater being a little higher in nitrogen, because it picks up atmospheric nitrogen and lets in there. So it's actually helping restore some of that soil health that these plants need. And then when you factor in, bison coming through here with their spade-shaped hoofs, bringing seed stock in from all over the place during their big migration. So now they're planting new seeds and they're bringing in increased genetic diversity of these plants. And then, of course, they're laying the landmines.
Yeah.
and bison patties are extremely high and extremely fertile. And bison patties don't sit on the landscape. They got insects that are just attracted to that gut microbiome. There's something about it. So the insects come in, and then when the insects come in, here come the birds. So now the birds are coming in, picking that dung apart, working through there, and now it's spread all over the place. So the next rain you get, now more of that can seep in. Whereas you look at a cow patty, it sits there, and you roll it, and you're like, oh, well, it hasn't rained enough to really disintegrate this bag.
Wow.
So you can sterilize, that until that patty gets broken up.
Okay.
You just didn't have that with the natural cycle, right?
Yeah.
And so when you think about restoration, it's all about working with Mother Nature, not against her. Leopold says the same tools that destroyed are the same tools that can build. The cow, the plow, the match, the axe, and the gun. And it's using those simple techniques to work with what the landscape wants to do to let things like all the birds come back. When we were at juniper forest or thicket, 48 species is all we were able to document. Now that might sound like a lot of birds, yeah. But we had
of dinosaurs.
Of extant dinosaurs, exactly. But we do bird counts at least 3 times a year. In our spring bird count, migration count in April, we got 69 species in 4 hours.
Wow.
And so
4
in
hours.
4 hours, and it was a cold, windy morning. It wasn't even a very good morning. So our official checklist went from 48 to now we've documented over 222 species of birds.
Wow.
I guess not over, right at 222.
Right at, yeah. And then how many grass species were you telling me you know of?
I know of 96 that are here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just remarkable.
227 woody species, 100 and something wild, like forbs. So it's incredible. And to think of what it looked like, so when you take your ride into the airport to Austin tomorrow, you're going to see more of the thicket, and you're just going to be thinking like, is this property going to be this? Is this going to be this? Oh, look, another subdivision going in.
Take me back to Bamberger Ranch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was cool. We had Mike, who I mentioned before, come out, and just to see him respond to this place, and then Monsell being out here and him responding to it, and then Jesse Griffiths came out, and he was sort of like, oh my God, like I need to be here, and just seeing the impact that it has on folks is really, really cool. Another strange phenomenon here I wanted to bring up is the bat cave. Yeah. And also, maybe you could first describe that and what the story of that is, but also some of the work you've done on bats, because you were really blowing my mind the other day with some of the things you were saying.
Yeah. So again, Mr. Bamberger has kind of been on the forefront of conservation in Texas since the 60s and 70s, and
it's wild because he's not a scientist.
No, he's not. He's a businessman.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally sold vacuum cleaners, which then led to a strange partnership with a gentleman by the name of Bill Church, and then they formed at one point, which was the largest fast food chain in the entire world.
Wow.
Church's Chicken.
Church's Fried Chicken.
Fried Chicken.
Yeah.
Right, and then he shifts over like this lateral step into ecology, but as a layperson.
Yeah.
And while he's not classically trained, he ends up doing probably one of the largest scale restoration projects on the books.
At one point, former Parks and Wildlife Director Dr. Andy Sansom was loved to say that this was at one point the largest privately owned habitat restoration project.
That's cool.
And now I am very proud to say we're like in the 30s.
That's awesome.
So there's a lot of people picking this up and doing this, and it's been, the state of Texas is a lot better for it.
Right.
But yeah, so in the 90s, Mr. Bamberger discovered bats, and he just became enthralled with them. And he met a bat biologist by the name of Merlin Tuttle. And Merlin was one of the founders of Bat Conservation International. So it's an internationally famous nonprofit just for bats. And David was instrumental in saving the world's largest bat cave. He was able to broker a deal with the private landowners there that nobody had been able to. He has just this way of you've met him. He just kind of puts you at ease, and then his personality just jumps out, and he just engulfs you, and you're just putty in his hands by the end of it, right? And so he was able to save Bracken Cave, or help save Bracken Cave.
What was going to happen to it?
Subdivision.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That is just hard to hear something like that.
Thousands of homes, like track homes, that was going to be built on that Bat Cave.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's so unethical, but it's so it's just the way of our system right now. You know,
Yeah.
it's not to blame anybody, but it's just like hard to hear it.
Yeah, and then he just started scouring the ranch to see if he had, because with as much karst as we have around here, he was really like, oh, I gotta have bats, like everybody around here, and he could see them flying around at night. So he was trying to figure out where they were coming from, and turns out we can't support large populations of bats, and he really wanted that, and so he started talking to other bat biologists and was like, can I build a cave? Is that a thing? Is that possible?
I mean, Batman did it.
Yeah. Oh, Batman's was a natural cave.
Okay.
That the foundations of Wayne Manor sit upon.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, so maybe if he wouldn't have saved Bracken Cave, we might have a real life Batman on our hands. But yeah, and so he found an architect that was just as crazy as him, and then they built the world's first and largest man-made bat cave.
And named it.
And yeah, so
What is that? What did they call this structure?
call it the Chiroptorium.
I love it.
Yeah, so like bat cave, especially with the fifth graders, that you say bat cave. First question to tie Grant back into this is, where's Batman? You know?
They all think they're the first one to say
They all
it.
think that. Like, and it's just a rush to get it out of their mouth, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so they came up with this, what we commonly refer to now as the upside down swimming pool. So if you take in-ground concrete swimming pools, you take that dome, and you flip it up on itself, and you create an opening, and you do that 3 times. There's 3 domes in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can attract bats.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was, the history of the bat cave is fantastic, and I encourage everybody out there that's listening to do a little bit more research, because I could probably do 9 podcasts, 9 hours just on this, right? But yeah, he didn't have bats for the first couple of years. Had to modify the design a little bit, close some windows, and as soon as those windows were covered up, 2 weeks later, bats came.
He had a story to tell last night, which, you know, I don't know if it's become hyperbole over the years, but it was basically that somebody had come in and written a fairly unsavory article on him and how he had spent all this money and had no bats.
Yep.
And then he said right when the article was published, like the next day, the bats had showed up, and this guy had like a panic and was going to lose his job for writing this story, because it turned out the project was a success. But
Bamberger's Folly.
Yeah,
That was the name of the article, yeah.
So for me, when we sat there one evening and watched the bat emergence, I thought, okay, if you're in Austin, this is old hat, because you can go downtown and see a bat emergence. Yep. But for people around the country who don't get to see that, what a phenomenon.
Yeah, it's I can't tell you how many bat emergencies I've seen, and I can tell you how many different bat caves I've been to. They're all different, and I love them. But there's something about knowing the Chiroptorium so well. Mm-hmm. Like, how many times I was like, you guys want to go to the bat cave tonight? You want to see an emergence? And, and as Mike and I were breaking down one of those hogs yesterday for him to take home, I was like, hey, man, if you ever want to come out with the family for a bat emergence, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Because I try to, like,
so cool.
Now that I've got, a family, it's like, I gotta really crowbar it in there to be able to get up there and spend some time where I really like it. But yeah, almost 400,000 bats in that thing, man.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you were telling me about work you did on bats that's just really incredible, man. Give us a little backstory on how that came to be and what you learned.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, hunting season is right around the corner. Are you interested in learning to hunt effectively with skill and good ethics, but feeling overwhelmed with how much there is to learn or not knowing where to start? Maybe you just need a little support to make it happen. Maybe you've already begun your hunting journey, but you want to increase your skills and knowledge to help you harvest more successfully and consistently. Either way, check out The Hunter's Journey at thehuntersjourney.com. I can tell you from personal experience, being able to walk into the woods and bring home food to feed my family and community is one of the most empowering and rewarding feelings I know of. It increases self-reliance, provides excellent food, and is an avenue for land stewardship and deep nature connection. But getting started can be challenging, especially if you weren't raised in a hunting family. There's so many barriers to overcome, like finding places to hunt, choosing the right gear, learning the skills, and knowing how to process your harvests afterwards. Chris Gilmore from episode 58 on tracking and awareness has designed this inclusive course and community to help you overcome those barriers and make the dream a reality. This course will walk you through step by step, beginning wherever you are now, all the way up to successful harvests and beyond. And Chris has extended a special offer to WildFed listeners. Go to thehuntersjourney.com to watch the trailer and enter the coupon code WildFed100 for $100 off the course. Again, that's thehuntersjourney.com, and the coupon code WildFed100 gets you $100 off the next step on your hunter's journey. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, so I've been kind of sidestepping. I've been cheating on my true passion of herpetology with bats since college.
You have like a genuine guilt when you talk about this. I gotta say, it's not just like a talking point. When you talk about it, I'm like, oh, he feels. Because, like, for the listener, you also have 22 snakes in the other room, right?
Right.
And you're also, have quite an amazing reptile collection. And not big old boas and stuff. You got, like, little poisonous snakes.
Yeah, dude, it's all native, right? Because that's my passion is the native stuff. Like, if I want to go see boas, I will go where the boas are. But I don't want to keep them.
Right.
Because we do a lot of educational programs with snakes. The only good snake is a live snake, right? And so they're not going to see boas and pythons around here. They're going to see rat snakes, and they're going to see diamondback rattlesnakes and copperheads. And so that's what I keep. And so I spent a couple weeks in West Texas. I went as a field tech on a bat project just so I could go around herping and find snakes and lizards.
Herping.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a verb.
Hashtag ABH. Always be herping.
Always be herping.
So, yeah.
It's not real popular saying amongst the college kids.
No, it's not. I'm trying to make it a thing though. And I just fell in love with mist netting bats. I mean, to see and the diversity.
What do you call it?
Mist netting.
Okay.
So you take a net that's a very fine material. So it's little hexagons in there, and the bats can't see it, and they fly into it.
They can't echolocate it.
Yeah, exactly. And so you set it up over a water source, so when they come down to drink, they get caught. Or you set up where bats are flying and they get caught in there, and then you can take them out, just like you would do if you were banding a bird. You would be using a different style of mist net, but the concept is still the same, right? So think of a volleyball net.
Yep.
Okay, and that catches bats. And then you start seeing pallid bats, and you're like, whoa, these things are trippy. And then you start seeing ghost-faced bats, and you're like, these are even trippier. And then, of course, you get your free tails, but like just the sheer diversity over there, I was like, oh, man.
Wait, are there multiple species of bats in that cave?
There are two species in the Chiropterium, two main species. We get some flyers every now and again that aren't either the free tails or the cave bats. Those are like the dominant bats that we have here in Central Texas.
This project where you're talking about mist netting is another location.
This was out in the Big Bend region.
Okay.
Right. So Texas is home to 32 bat species.
Yeah. Wow.
And diversity increases as you go west. And so like we just got to see everything, and I just fell in love with it. And and then kind of when I became a full-time biologist out here, it was like, oh, wait a minute. I love bats. So I just kind of dove into it and started working with A&M and Texas State and some other universities on different projects to help bats. And when white nose kicked up, white nose fungus that you're familiar with up in the Northeast, I mean, 100% mortality in a lot of those populations from that disease.
And for listeners who aren't aware, this is, if you're into bats, this is the big story going on.
Yeah.
This is like chronic wasting disease in cervids or something.
Yeah.
We have a fungal infection in the bat populations. It's a very severe problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. And because so many of these species of bats migrate, they're constantly, and they're kind of transient too, right? So they'll stop over at different caves. And so if they've got those spores from PD, which is Pseudomonas destructans, then...
What a name.
I know, right? It's true, though.
What's the genus?
Pseudoginomus?
Okay.
Destructans. Destructans, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so with these bats coming from cave to cave to cave, you can trace white nose starting in 2006, 2007 in New York, and you can just trace the mortality and the spores down south. And so in 2016, I had a friend at A&M who came down from Bucknell, which is in Pennsylvania, to study bats at A&M, get her graduate degree there. And then she hooked up with Parks and Wildlife. And they started going, hey, we need to start swapping caves and like see if the disease is in Texas. and what we can possibly do to slow the spread of this. And turns out it was here it showed up in North Texas the next year, and then just a slow trickle effect. And we are, in fact, positive for the fungus here on the ranch, but we've never had a bloom. And so what really kind of sparked my my research was going, we've got a ton of bats in the wintertime. And the only time it's cold in Texas is the wintertime. And so maybe we've never had a bloom because it's just too warm in the cave. So we put data loggers in there, which capture humidity and temperature in each one of those rooms. And we just started trending it. And then I was seeing the bats come in and go. And if you think the emergence we saw the other night was cool, try having it when there's like ice outside and there's still bats coming out. And so I just started like tracking emergence times versus weather versus what's going on in the cave, and then adding that to the studies that Parks and Wildlife and A&M and Texas State were doing. And we've just found some really trippy stuff. Like if there's insects flying, there's bats flying. And so and our bats here go through torpor, which is like a sleep for a couple days, right? Just low energy usage. They don't really hibernate because it's too warm.
But there is a metabolic slowdown in torpor.
Exactly. And so and when we had snowpocalypse in February, we didn't lose any bats. So we were, I got a call from Jonah Evans, who's our Texas Parks and Wildlife non-game biologist, mammologist, really long titles over there.
Yeah.
Basically, he's the state mammologist, and he wanted to know how we did. And so I went in that afternoon, and we found 7 bats. So we still had a couple thousand in there, but there were 7 on the ground dead. And you can go in there on a normal day and find 7 on the ground dead.
So not outside of baseline.
Right, exactly. But we donated the specimens to the museum, so they've got them, and they're going to be able to test like what happened. And that report will probably come out in 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Because there's so many dead bats.
Yeah, right.
But bridge colonies got hit a lot harder than cave colonies, and that's kind of like what we figured out.
Oh, yeah, they don't have the stable temperatures.
Yeah.
Right.
So just kind of figuring out why we've got bats in the winter. Turns out because they can eat. And they can drink, and they can survive. And so if these are the free-tailed bats that maybe spend time in Colorado, or northern Oklahoma, they don't have to migrate all the way back down to Central America and Brazil. So just found some really cool stuff. It's been a lot of fun to look at that.
Tell me some of the stuff about the speeds that you were talking about. Some of these bats, and the speeds they can fly. It was pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, 100 miles an hour plus into the wind. True flight, not a dive, right? And that's what's really crazy. So we hooked up backpacks, little radio transmitters. This was Dr. Gary McCracken, University of Tennessee. He's our board member out here now for the Bamberger Ranch Preserve. And so, he tracking a little bat with a little radio from an airplane. And it's just incredible. There's a Nova documentary coming out where we recreated that experiment, and it's gonna blow people's minds. I think it's called Super Bats.
And just to say it, I'm a little slower when I have my backpack on, so hey, I'll edit this out if I'm going into territory you don't want to talk about, but you keep. Every time we talk about bats, you keep talking about the old world bats and their relationship to primates or potential relationship to primates.
Yeah.
Want to say anything about that?
Yeah. I will just say this. I think by the time I how do I phrase this? Before I die, I think we will all be in a shock when we see flying foxes and fruit bats reclassified as primates.
This just blows my mind. I want to argue so bad, and I'm just like, well, I don't know anything about it. But it's like, how can that be? So that'd be really interesting to see, more closely related, obviously, to monkeys than apes or something like that, or even lemurs or so.
Yeah,
are lemurs primates?
Lemurs are primates.
Yeah. So, okay, so they'd be kind of like further down the road from us, but that's a really neat concept,
Oh, dude, it's just, science is just so amazing because as technology improves, we take all of this field knowledge from even the early 1900s and we go, oh, we can redo this experiment now with radios and backpacks, right?
Right.
Like, oh, how fast does a bat fly? Oh, we don't need a radar gun. We can actually track it.
Right.
And so I really look forward to when we can just put a little microchip in it and then just document it from there, and really like get it down to the exact mile an hour it was flying, and not just look at airspeed and go, So, but yeah, it's coming. Yeah, it's coming. I'm not the only biologist that says it. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just a kook, that
you don't strike me as a kook.
Is there any history of a winged primate?
Wings don't fossilize very well. And so when you start thinking, like, do you know what an anii is? So an anii is a lemur-like animal in Madagascar. And they've got these giant phalanges.
Yeah.
And they just like scratch, and they
that.
get like insects out of the trees with these super long fingers. And so you look at the structure of that and you go, man, that's just missing a membrane, just missing a sheath, to do this. So it's possible.
But they're also still related to the other bats?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they'd be like a bridge species between them.
Theoretically, right? I mean, that's just what,
I'll be watching with bated breath.
Yeah.
Another word I've heard you bring up quite a few times is conservation. And obviously that's one that people who are into hunting and fishing hear a lot. But I wanted to get your take on it and sort of your perspective, because it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And, you're a zoologist by training, right? Herpatologist, huge passion for wildlife, but you are also a hunter, and you're somebody like myself who eats game, and your family eats game. So talk about what conservation is to you, just so people know kind of what page you're on with all of that.
Man, I hate this question, and I love this question, right? Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is that conservation is like an onion. There's a lot of layers to it, right? And the biggest and most important layer is it's not free. We're a nonprofit, and the wildlife that you see here today is because of our hunting program that brings in revenue, and then B, the generous people that want to give us donations to see this place protected. And when you protect an area like this, you just get better game because you're managing right. And so for me, conservation is kind of like this area where science meets practicality. And it's going like, oh, this is just, I'd probably use the term applied science, right? And it's taking, what the people that are smarter than me say because of a model or an experiment, and then going, what's feasible for me in my landscape?
To roll this out.
Yeah, exactly. And so Mr. Bamberger had the means at the time to build a bat cave. Bats were in trouble. He knew that, and he wanted a bat cave. He wanted to see if it could get done and attract bats, and it can. So now people can take that model, scale it however they want, and attract bats. And just down the road here, about 60 miles from here, there's another bat cave, another upside down swimming pool.
Somebody did it. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
And I'm working on 2 other landowners right now that are very interested. I did a site visit out in Real County in April of this year to kind of look at the feasibility. And so it's just cool. It's I don't know if you want to call that rewilding or just conservation, right? And so
just sometimes conservation, I have found that some folks who hunt or fish, who just generally don't actually care about the environment itself, but they will use it as a shield to get behind. So really just to justify their own hobbies, but to paint this picture that they're very much involved. And it's like, well, your only real involvement is that your hunting license money goes into the conservation pool and your ammunition tax and your gun tax. And I'm grateful that that's happening. But sometimes my concern is that for the general public could lose respect for the term or reverence for the term, because you see a lot of the FUDs, the bubbas, pretending they're conservationists, but their lifestyle, you can tell that it's not really important to them. So when you talk about it, I'm getting this like Leopold type vibe. And then I see that your life is an example of walking it out and doing actual, and not just like nerdy science work.
Yeah.
You're doing like manual labor on the landscape too, to make this into a reality here. And this place is like this paradise that reflects that actual work you guys have done.
Yeah, and so I eat off the landscape. So I want to keep this landscape as pristine as possible. I don't want chemicals. We don't want fertilizer. We don't want poisons. We don't use a lot of that stuff out here.
Yeah, it was funny that day, Grant. We were driving, we were up high, and there was that balloon, like a balloon piece of plastic had floated down and you just sort of like, you pulled over. You're like, oh, that's the only source of pollution on this.
Like freaking kids in their birthday party.
You know, you're
I
out
think
there.
That was an exact quote. Right?
Yeah, you know, I really see that. You know, you really live this. You're not just talking.
No, I mean, you have to, right? I have a son now. He's going to turn 2 in a couple weeks. And like, I didn't want kids because I was like, man, what's this world going to? I mean, growing up, my dad was like telling us stories, and you know, growing up in the 80s, so 30 years ago, not that long ago, he was telling us stories about what this property was like when he was our age and this, and he's a very well-traveled man. So as we were traveling the country with him, he'd just go like, oh, we used to be able to find this, and this, or the water doesn't look the same here. It's brown. It didn't used to be brown. And so walking through that, and so all that stuff just kind of sticks with you.
And all that's still with shifting baseline in place too. So what he was seeing lost doesn't reflect what was actually lost. It just reflects what he saw over the course of his life.
Exactly. And so when you think about conservation, you know, I've got my baseline, you've got yours. I want my son's baseline to be as close to mine as possible. And he's going to get that locally growing up here on this landscape. But not everybody has that luxury, right? And so doing things like this, having WildFed out here, doing these podcasts, but it really starts with our educational programs here on the ranch. Having those 5th graders that are coming out next week and going, you live in San Antonio, you live in Austin, you don't know this landscape. But those cows that you see in those lower fields, that gets turned into that hamburger that you ate. Coming from, do you want your cows to come from a place that looks like this or a feedlot? You know, and try to get that connection to food again. And when they have that connection to food, then they can start connecting with the landscape, or vice versa. Something has to click. There has to be that aha moment. Yeah. And I still remember my aha moment being in 4th grade, and they taught us that water was a renewable resource. And even at that time, I was like, no. I'm like, no. Like I know that's not true. Like I see what's happening here, because we had new subdivisions going in, and you know, we had this beautiful like 50, 60 acre field in our backyard. We grew up on an acre in a subdivision, but we had nature right in our backyard. Didn't have to go too far from it. And then I remember it started for sale signs. Then it started to get split down, and then a doctor's office went in, and then a mini mall went in. And then by the time I left, our town of like 1,000 people had 2 Dunkin' Donuts. It's just like, man, that's crazy to think about that. Right. And I don't want that. I don't want that for the world. I want everybody to be able to come out to a place like this, or a national park or state park, and breathe in the best landscape they can. When they shoot a deer, I want that thing to taste the best. And if it doesn't start with the landscape, I don't know where it starts. Yeah.
You guys have been talking a lot about the flavor of the animals on the landscape, and actually yesterday, when we had harvested beautyberry, which was a new species for me that you introduced me to while we were here, Calicarpa americana. Not a real flavorful fruit in its raw state, although it does have some flavor. We laughed a lot about the tasting a bit foamy and you know, kind of medicinal, but then when Jesse was here, he was like, well, these are better tasting than any beautyberries I've ever had. And the jam that we made was just, it's really, really good.
It was unreal.
You know? And then same thing with the flavor of the animals. And it seems to be, you know, I would say, and also I have to say, Mr. Bamberger and Joanna, for their age, are, I mean, their hair, their skin, it was like, it's just the water and the good soil and the
Yeah.
you know.
When I was
the-
editing that footage just looking at the footage, I was like, is Mr. Bamberger wearing makeup? I was like, he can't be wearing makeup. His
93
skin looks
years
so
old,
good.
you know. I mean, and she also in her 80s, maybe 10 years younger or so.
Daniel, you were just like, spring water, man.
Yeah, it's good spring water. Yeah, but you know, also the animals here, and I've just never seen so many deer. It's just, you know, living in Maine where there's a lot of development, the habitat's changed a lot. So anyway, seeing all these animals here, it's, you know, we'd be driving around, and I remember at one point there were like 6 or 7 whitetails out, and we're driving on these, you know, it's just a small network of roads here. And you guys were talking, and you didn't even, Grant, you guys weren't like, oh, hey, look at those deer. You just kept on talking. It's like so common here that it's like, it doesn't warrant conversation sometimes. Seeing bucks with just beautiful racks walking around.
How many deer do you think we saw when we drove in the first time? 10, 15?
Yeah, and we got here, we were like, well, we saw like 10 deer on the way in here. I was just like, yeah, so what? So that's really neat. But then also, there's some exotic species here. Now, around this ranch, we're in a part of Texas that's sort of known for ranching exotics, right? So this is this aspect of the hunting world that I haven't really been exposed to. I've heard a little bit about it, but being out here, I'm like, oh, this is what people are talking about. Because, like, name some species that might surprise people that are on some of the ranches in this area.
Oh, man.
Ranches that aren't doing regenerative work, but are just raising livestock.
Yeah, like we have ranches very close to us that have water buffalo, blue buffalo, Cape buffalo, water buck, and just, I mean, name a species, and we pretty much have kudu, you know, and it's just, this landscape is very similar to Africa, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a savanna. And
so a lot of those are paid hunts, canned hunts, kind of high fence operations and stuff. But you guys also have a couple of exotic species, one of which is an endangered antelope.
Correct.
That you guys are part of a sort of a genetic conservation of the biodiversity of the genome of this animal. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the scimitar horned oryx is the species you're referring to, and they were brought here in the late 70s, early 80s, with Mr. Bamberger partnering with the San Antonio Zoo when the species survival program was getting started, and they started noticing loss of these ungulates over there in Africa, and then in zoos they were doing real well. And so at one point our herd was the world's most diverse. We had 29 representatives of the known 32 lineages or blood types, right? And so we've just kept them here. We don't hunt them.
But for the listener, you can't, even if you like. It's not something you guys don't. They're not your livestock to kill, right? They're an endangered species, so this is like a CITES thing, I imagine.
Well, it's a animal rights thing, because so this is an African species that was put on the U.S. endangered species list
because people were raising them here.
Yeah, the New Jersey cat ladies had a little too much influence one day, and somehow it made the list. And
so it's on the ESA.
Yeah,
that's bizarre.
It really is, because there's more scimitar horned oryx in Texas than there likely ever was running around Chad, Niger, and Mali.
Wow.
I mean, we probably have 10,000 in Texas. I feel very comfortable that that's an underestimation too.
Well, I'm looking at one right now, and at a taxidermy of one, and when I first saw it, I thought it was like a giant goat or something, you know. But
very horse-like. So it's about the size of a horse.
White and a nice tawny brown. And those, horns that are, some of them must be 3.5 feet long. Some of the horns
you
we
get
saw
44, 46 inch spreads on those things.
Wow. Yeah, they're beautiful. And we saw some axis deer. That's not an animal that you guys are really looking to promote on the landscape, but is one that's all over Texas, it sounds like.
Yeah, it is. It's one that has, it's kind of like feral hogs. It's everybody in Texas is eventually going to get them. Yeah. They adopt it very well, naturalize, some might say, to the landscape, and outcompete the whitetail. They're browsers and grazers, so they're really really damaging to farmers, especially when you just plant. Like grass. They'll come in and then just hammer it.
Is it an open hunting season?
Yeah, there is no, as of now. If I have a feeling that we're heading in a different way in Texas with the regulations of exotic hunting, and I hope there's never a season on them because we have so many, but it's just a matter of time because you can make money off of it.
Something I said to you while we were here, I developed this sudden, I guess, like kind of eat your pride, or, like, oh, you recognize your hubris or something. I had a moment of compassion for people who, I had the real negative view of people who would go to like a high fence and there'd be all these exotic animals. And they would be like, I want to shoot that one. How much would that be? And there's like a menu, right? And you go like, that one's 5,000. It's like, okay, I'm going to shoot that. And then like, oh, that's cool. How much would it be to shoot that? Like, that always really grossed me out. But then we were driving up there and I saw those axis deer. And I mean, dude, I had the strongest sense of like, I want to eat that thing really bad. Like, how much is it? Like I got not saying that I would participate in that, but I understood for a second how somebody could feel that way. And if they didn't have a strong guiding compass to guide them, I can just see how that kind of behavior emerges.
Yeah.
Because seeing some of those exotic animals, being a country boy from Maine, I never saw an axis deer before, and what a beautiful animal.
Yeah. Antler allure is real.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm being callous when I say I don't have it. I don't really care about that, because I'm after the animal that's going to eat the best, right? So I want like prime age and I want prime size for however I envision it. And so I never got caught up in headgear, but I can see it, right? If that's what you're into, and we had the conversation even before we got to that pasture about that. And then I could like see the twitch in your eye, like, ooh, I get it now, because it was already primed for you. Yeah. And then you just put yourself in that mindset, even though that's not your ethos, right?
Yeah.
So it's just crazy.
Just like wanted to eat one so bad, wanted to shoot one, wanted to eat one. That kind of brings us to why we're here, which is hogs, and I really like how you approach this, because you're very pragmatic about the hog situation. I see where you respect and care about them. I see where you're also very aligned with those who are frustrated with them as well, and you are pragmatic about the damage that they do to the landscape. You're also very realistic about the scope of what can actually be accomplished. But more than anything, I really like that you see this as a useful food resource, not just something we want to nuke from the sky.
Yeah.
And I really like that. And getting to hunt hogs with you and process hogs with you was just a really great experience. So maybe you could just kind of share with our audience, how you view the issue with hogs, what it's like here in Texas, and also maybe about eating them.
Yeah, well, let's just start with the food connectivity first, right? When I first got to Texas and discovered feral hogs, everybody said they were terrible. Like, don't eat them. It's trash. Just shoot them. Vultures, let the vultures eat them. And then, so I never did. I didn't have my first hog until, I was probably 25 or 26. And then I ate it, and it was okay. And then when I moved out to the ranch full time about 8 years ago, we were trapping hogs and we were shooting hogs. It's just part of the land management that we do out here. And then I was like, I'm going to try this again. And something switched in my brain and said, this is amazing. And Jesse said it yesterday too when he tried that boar hog. He's like, oh man, this tastes better than the one I brought. And it's true. Like, you're tasting the landscape out here. And so I just developed this like, oh man, any chance I get, let's try it. Let's get as much feral hog into people as possible. And that's one of the reasons Jesse and I get along so well, is because, eat a hog, save the world. I mean, it's true. If people started looking at it as a food source and not a hunting, not a commodity, is like, I'm going to sell hog hunts and I'm going to make a lot of money, so I want hogs here. You can't look at it that way, because there's plenty of hogs in Central Texas. You have to look at it as how can we take the food crisis that we're in the world, not even just this country,
right,
and like start getting people to like understand that like there's a food source that is an issue for Texans and for a lot of people here in the United States. I mean, Georgia, Florida. You've seen hogs all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so they're here, and what are we going to do about it?
And they're spreading. That was something I only came to realize recently, was that they've been here for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother story, which we don't really have time for, but how they sort of, got here and got spread around is really interesting. But something happened recently, relatively recently, recent decades, where the population started to boom. And now it seems that they're expanding their range and moving into new territory all the time. So do you have any sense of what's going on there?
They are a cosmopolitan species, like they just kind of do well wherever. And you can see their body size. We had this conversation about what's a big hog, right? Well, here for the Bamberger Ranch, a big hog would be 150, 175 pounds. We don't have a lot of those out here. We have a lot of those 40 and 50 pounders, the ones that really eat well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just the fact that their body size kind of attributes to the resources that they're getting. And so they can spread. They have that ability. They can go from Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, where they were like kind of the domestic pig was kind of released from. Yeah. And then they can come down south where the Spaniards had brought, their pigs and let them go in Florida and Georgia. And then you start getting the interbreeding from pigs that are in the area that get out, that escape. And before you know it, it's just pig hog heaven, so it's just the natural history of the species is just perfect for this. It's perfect for a lot of landscapes, I mean, there's pigs everywhere. Like, look at Australia. Yeah. The same kind of thing. Like, and without the predators that we would have had, we don't have many mountain lions anymore. Yeah. We don't have a whole lot of black bear in Texas anymore. We definitely don't have jaguars. Jaguars eat a ton of peccaries and things down in Mexico and Central America. So, like, if we take that apex predator and put it back on this landscape, I'm cool with it. Yeah. Like, I don't need that many in my freezer, right? Right. But landowners are never going to go for that because it's not the jaguars are going to go, it's a lot harder to eat this pig than it is that calf that was just born over there, right?
Yeah, those pigs are tough.
Yeah.
And a little scary in some cases.
Yeah, well, the cutters on that boar that you harvested was, I mean, even I was impressed with those. Those things were like a knife blade.
Yeah. Well, and granted, he was, because that one was in a corral trap, which I have never got to experience. So I've done a little hunting, but getting to see the trapping was really cool. For folks listening, one interesting thing here is that when you see wild hog on a menu, it's because they've been corral trapped or trapped in some way, and then brought to USDA slaughterhouses where they can be inspected, and then they can enter the food market, which is something that we'd love to see expanded so that there's more demand to draw some of these off the landscape. But seeing one in a corral trap, he was obviously stressed and worked up, but he kept charging me right into the fence. He cut the bridge of his nose doing it. And I imagine if I ran into him on the landscape, he would be less stressed and he would probably flee, get away from me. But seeing what would happen, the idea that you're going to get your sidearm out and put a clean headshot, a stopping headshot on that animal before those cutters rip through your legs, just no way. And the infection that would ensue, just the idea of getting into a tussle with one of those animals, that's not a peccary. This guy is a tank.
Yeah. I mean, they're just, when you think of the size of their neck, and they have like that giant head.
Shovel head.
Yeah. And like, they're just meant to uproot stuff and plow through trees, like logs on the landscape to eat the snakes and lizards and stuff. And
the volume of soil they turn over.
Yeah. Which is one of the good things that they do.
But it's also the thing that people hate that they do.
That's right. That's right. There's areas where we wish we could just be like, oh, hey, hog, come over here and aerate this soil, right? Yeah. But they want to go down into those bottomlands where there still is soil. And then they want to go in the creek and they want to wallow, and then they're going to spread diseases. And, nobody wants to drink spring water that has hog feces in it, Right. And so it's just a lot of damage that they can do, and it happens overnight too. Right. Especially this time of year.
I saw it on that trail. We walked the trail one day, it looked good. I walk it the next day, half of it's turned over.
Yeah. And so that's why hunting enough, it's just not there.
What was the numbers you said that you'd have to harvest
60% to keep the population at its current number. Yeah. So that means if you have 100 hogs on your property, you have to take 60 out a year. See, that was simple math. I can do that.
Yeah.
And then you have to do that year after year after year. Yeah. So when you think of like, let's put that in the terms of biomass.
Yeah.
So one hog, like that boar, was about 110, 115 pounds, right? Now, let's do the math and extrapolate that out. That's a lot of food.
Yeah.
That's a lot of energy, like, there. What do we do with it?
Yeah.
Like, I eat probably 50 or 60 hogs myself.
Yeah.
But with 5,500 acres, we've got who knows what our hog population is.
Right.
I mean, we hunt and trap about 200 hogs a year is what we're averaging, you know? And so when you think about that number, you saw it. We have hogs just running around, you know, and there's nothing we can do about it. We're putting the pressure on them, and they just keep coming back.
Like coyotes, though, it seems like their response to pressure isn't to like fold up shop. It's like they seem to really thrive even when you put pressure on them, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, when one sow can have like almost 3 dozen babies in a year, like it's just PPE, man, postpartum estrus. They just keep going like a rat.
Yeah, it's so neat. We were talking about this the other day, butchering them or gutting them. That anatomically, their digestive system looks just like our digestive system. And I also think that their story is, where all of these different pigs from around the world are all Suscrafa, one species, the parallels to humans are really obvious. We've got a lot of humans that look like we look real different, but we're all Homo sapiens sapien, right? We're all the same. We all can breed together. Globalization's brought us together in such a way that we're cosmopolitan now, and the pigs that we've spread around the world are cosmopolitan. And there's something about the hatred that people have for them that I don't think is fair. I feel like this animal has been with us for thousands of years as a domesticated animal. It's been a food resource for us for so long. While I'm frustrated by the damage they do, particularly I'm less compassionate about them turning soil over than I am about them eating ground nesting birds and things like that. That's where I'm like, oh yeah, that's a problem. When native species are suffering from them, that is a problem. But I just can't bring myself to hate them. To me, I can appreciate them as appreciate? I can appreciate them as an animal, And I still want to eat them. I still want to shoot them. I think people should harvest as many of them as they want to. I have no problem with any of that. I just don't like when people hate them,
Yeah, I think that word hatred is it's misunderstanding, right? Mm-hmm. When you take an animal that's the ultimate adapter and ultimate survivor, very similar to us as Homo sapiens, and I really hate that they're the worst invasive species of all time. And I'm like, hey, why don't you look in the mirror, man? Like we came out of Africa a long time ago, and we're everywhere. There's not a single.
And we're exotic, and we're also highly invasive and deleterious.
And that's like, so if you take those same qualities when you look at humans and you put them on pigs, like people have to be like, man, that's respect. Like they're on the landscape. You can't hate them. Yeah. And a lot of people can't outthink them. I mean, you saw all the different traps we have out here, and how many nights did it take before we finally got one board in there? Yeah. One. And I'm telling you about how we've had a whole sounder in here, and we saw all the hog damage. We saw all the pitter patter in the tracks, and then one in 3 or 4 nights of trapping. Like, it's just not right.
I would love to see some science fiction where humans are terraforming other planets and there's invasive species that accidentally get out. I've never like encountered that in scientific sci-fi literature, because there's always talk about humans going to other places, but if we do that, it's gonna be like, damn it, the hogs got out on Mars. And now we can't reel them in, like they're doing so well there or whatever. But you also have wasps here.
Yeah, we do. We've got lots of species of Hymenoptera out here, and Grant, you learned firsthand what it feels like to be stung by a red wasp, huh?
It doesn't hurt that much.
They were all worried about tarantulas and spiders, and
it's one of the first things I asked you when I got here, because I remember the first morning I went out to sit on a little hill, and I picked up a stone to use as a seat. And I sat on it, kind of watched the sunrise. But when I picked up that stone, there was a bark scorpion under there. And I thought, okay, be mindful, you know. Not the end of the world, but like I certainly don't want to get stung. You know, and I saw your snakes, and that was kind of like, what a psycho. You've got all these like highly venomous snakes. And so it's like, okay, that kind of thing is out here. And I just like to be mindful of that because I'm somebody who likes to wear flip-flops or go barefoot. Or this is a hard landscape to go barefoot in. I tried that first morning, actually, when I went up and saw that scorpion. But all of those, what's that little spiky seed pod that gets in your feet?
Which one?
It's like a little barb. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, some of those were in my feet. And so, okay, but I like to wear shorts and all these, hence my chigger bites and all that stuff. But anyway, I was concerned of what's here, but Grant, maybe you want to just share a little bit about your story, because this is something I've never seen happen before.
Something I've never really been worried about is wasp, bees. I've got stung plenty of times, but we were just looking for a place to do the dinner here for the TV show, and a wasp. We must have been near a nest. A wasp flew into my face, stung me.
Well, it flew into your face and like attached to you.
Yeah, it stuck to me, and it's like, I think I'm gonna get stung.
Yeah, but you were like trying to pull it off, like it had kind of gripped you for a second, and it looked like, because we're all laughing at you, and it looked like funny.
It was funny to me too. I knew I was gonna get stung, but I wasn't like really worried about it.
And then you were like, oh, it stung me, like no big deal. Yeah.
Jared was like, don't run, and then I thought he said run, so I ran a little bit.
I'm pretty sure I was telling you to run, though. In fairness,
and then. I guess I didn't really see them, but you guys said they were a bunch swarming me when I stopped running. And Jared was like, you've been marked, run.
Yeah, it very quickly went from don't run to go.
So I ran around the building, and like not even like that fast. I was just kind of like jogged away.
And not more than like 30 yards or so.
Mm-hmm. And I was just worried that I was going to have like a big swollen eye, because it stung me right on the eyebrow. And I was like, oh, it's going to be uncomfortable and annoying for the next couple days shooting. It's going to like get in the way of my vision. And then I just started getting itchy on my feet and all over my...
That first symptom was itchiness?
Yeah, I was like itchiness on my feet, and then like tingling all over my body.
Yeah, because I remember you saying like I'm starting to feel it all through my body, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And I thought you were just like pulling our leg because we've been joking around the whole time. It was kind of a funny scene at first, and then it got real serious.
Yeah, everything changed. You were starting to sweat.
I started to like my vision started to change. I couldn't really see. It's like when you get up too fast and you get lightheaded and you see stars. And I was like, I'm getting lightheaded.
Like a hypovolemic thing.
And you guys were like, all right, let's get you into the car.
But no, you were sweating though too, like really profuse sweating. I mean, your whole head was like big, heavy beads of sweat. And you said something like, I feel like I might pass out. Because I put your arm around me. Yeah. And I started walking.
After I said that is when you put your arm around me.
I was like, okay, he's serious. Like this isn't, because it still was like, okay, this is kind of funny. All right, starting to like get less funny. And then you started talking about passing out, and being as I know you better than everybody who was here, I was like, man, Grant doesn't play about stuff like you never make jokes like that. I looked in your eyes, I was like, he looks scared.
I remember sitting in the car. You tried to like get my pulse too. I remember
and I couldn't find it. And that
which
really
you didn't say it in the moment. But
I was like, he's having a hypovolemic response. He's got such low pressure. He's feeling like he's going to pass out, and I'm not finding a strong pulse.
I remember sitting in the car being like just having to try to breathe, you know. I was like, and I was like, guys, I have to put a lot of effort into breathing right now.
Then we shifted immediately. You were like, I think somebody's got an EpiPen. Somebody had left an EpiPen here in the Science Center.
Yeah, and I was able to like, it took me a lot longer to find it. And then as soon as you came through the door, I opened that drawer, and I was like, got it.
Because I was like, Jared, we got to go.
And so then we get back in the truck, and we start driving. And I'm pulling out my cell phone, trying to call 911, because, Daniel, you and I looked at each other like, uh-oh. Like, we're, he's coming, Grant, you're coming in and out of consciousness.
Yeah, your head was drooping. You were, like, becoming unresponsive.
I remember you guys were like, look at Daniel, count to 10. Mike was like, count to 10. And I was like, well, I did it.
Your voice was like, I was like Rocky Balboa after he gets beat up.
I could see your face, and everything else around was just bright white.
Whoa.
I couldn't see anything. It was like overexposing for film.
Yeah. You were not making sense. You were starting to get really delirious.
Basically the end of what I remember.
Yeah.
Well, then it got fun for me because
he says fun.
I get one of those EpiPens. I was like one of those 2-packs. Man, everybody should just have one. They should just
be standard in the med kit.
Because it's not like and I've never heard of anybody abusing them, like a bunch of kids getting together and hitting themselves with
them and Crank. Or was it Voltage?
One of those movies.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, maybe. But still, I think it's worth it. Unfortunately, they're just too hard to access. You just never know when somebody's going to have an anaphylactic reaction. It's not just to stings. Lots of things can cause it. It's such a life-saving measure. They shouldn't be so expensive and so hard to access. I mean,
I've been stung by a lot of things. Never had any reaction like that. So I've never been worried about it. But
I wanted to get consent from you. So I've got that EpiPen, right? And there's a little blue cap in the back that you pull out, and then once you do that, you can actuate it. So I'm holding it kind of high up, and I go, Grant, I'm going to stick you with this EpiPen. Is that okay? And you your head was like, not just down, but like bobbing from the car's motion, and you're still trying to get a service to call. And I go, Grant, I'm going to do this. Is that okay? And you're like, yes. So I just slam it down on your leg, and I pin it into your leg for 5 seconds. That's what I remember in training with them. And I was expecting you to look up and be like, ow, but you just didn't even respond, as if it hadn't happened. And even if it was just that if I hammer punched your leg, normally you would notice. You didn't feel me do that. You didn't feel the needle. You didn't respond to it. That was really freaked me out, man. I was scared for you. I was a little nervous that we were going to lose you for a minute. We were all staying very calm and everything, but because we knew we needed to, and we wanted to be careful what we said around you. Also, because Jared, you had come out and been like, these EpiPens are expired, and you heard that, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember you said, Jared, do you have any EpiPens? He was like, yeah, I have some in the Science Center, but they're expired. And I was like, great. I knew you guys were trying to stay calm. I was picking up on they're worried, but they're trying to stay calm.
And the funny thing is, we had gone swimming in the lake. So Grant, you were wearing a white T-shirt, which I think had to have been a bad color for that wasp interaction in the first place. You're a big flag ripping through that green lawn, but you had on those basketball shorts and probably flip-flops
and a white T-shirt.
So I was like, guys, I think we got to get his license because we're going to go to the hospital. I was like, we got to get his license. And I was like, let's get him some other clothes.
So we ran into the cabin real quick, found his wallet, and we were like, what bag? I was like, Mike, what bag is Grant? He's like, that one. I was like, grab the whole bag. And then as we came back out of the cabin, you were just coming to, and then you started going, I think I'm going to throw up.
Yeah.
And then you evacuated, and then you were like, I need to get out of the car. Then you wander over to the side of the driveway, and I'm like, is he getting better? Is he getting worse?
I remember Daniel saying something to you guys about, and when I stabbed him with the EpiPen, I was like, you guys gave me an EpiPen?
Yeah, then I was like, God, he doesn't know I gave him and I had been like, don't eat too many of my peaches. And then you ate a couple that morning, and I look at the puke, I'm like, that's all those peaches. You wasted 2 peaches.
As soon as we pulled up to the cabin and I woke up, I knew I was okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, right? There was this sense of you were coming back to, you were throwing up, so all the adrenaline was starting to wear down, and the sense of urgency on the whole situation just kind of
started to calm
down.
But you were also trying to get your pants off, and then you ended up in the bathroom.
I think from that point on, I was sick from the EpiPen. I was just throwing up, and I was like, I think I'm gonna shit.
Yeah,
get me out of this car.
I kept coming in to mother you in the bathroom.
I remember I went to the edge of the driveway. I was like, I might just have to shit here.
Yeah, you were gonna pull down the basketball shorts.
And then I remember okay, we got to make it to the bathroom. Here we go.
And then you sat there with your pants around your ankles and a bucket on
waste
your
basket
lap.
around, covering my crotch.
And I just kept coming in.
I remember just looking at you in the eye, this is happening.
Yeah, I was like, we're making eye contact right now. This is odd. But then I remember coming out, and you and I and Mike having long conversations about the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
And then we'd be like, Grant, you okay? And you'd be like, I'm like, okay, he's still breathing. Yeah, so we kept going back and forth, but then we were like, maybe we don't need to go to the hospital, and Mike looks at us and goes, guys, if you administer epi, you have to follow up by going to the hospital. And you and I both I felt like we both didn't really want to at that point, but we were like, he's right. Like,
I know. We're like, it's an hour away. And the whole time Grant was in the bathroom and we were having these conversations, I'm still trying to get service to call EMS and just like, what are we supposed to do?
Did 911 ever call you back?
No. 911 didn't. I guess it never went through. I mean, I don't know how it works, but like I'm sitting there like, come on. And then finally, I was able to get a hold of the hospital, and they were like, yep, come in. And then we decided, well, let's just go to the local EMS station.
Yeah, it's like 15 minutes away, and
we did the Nerf version of the hospital.
But then when we got to the EMS station and they came out, and I get out, I have all my notes that I'd written the times that everything happened, stung at this time, epi administered at this time, throwing up, vomiting at this time. So I get out and I'm like ready to give all my notes. I'm like, this is my friend. He's just been through all this. And they're like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, don't care. And they brought you in there. And I was like, no, I know he looks fine now, but it was really serious, But like, they didn't care. And they just ran there, did all their diagnostics on you, sent you out.
Took my glucose level, my blood pressure. They put what are the sticky things? Like, it's not an EKG.
Yeah, it's an EKG.
Yeah.
Which is funny because it's an electrocardiogram, and cardio does not start with a K. So it should be an ECG. But anyway, so they did a 12 lead on you probably. You don't know, like a whole bunch of little stickies.
4.
On you. Oh yeah, okay. So they didn't take it too serious.
Well, he was perfectly responsive at that point too. So he was just really tired.
Yeah.
I remember when we hit the gates, he's like, guys, I want to take a nap. And I'm like, nope.
You're like, not until we get back.
Until we get there. I was like, we're going into town. If EMS tells us he's got to go to the hospiel, like, okay.
We're not letting you sleep.
Yeah, I don't want to be the one.
I remember asking for Jared's permission, like, can I take a nap? And you're like, nope.
When we got back, you slept hard.
Yeah.
And then you looked fine after that. Everything was fine. And then I wake up the next morning, I'm sending texts off like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe, baby, what happened last night. Granted, this whole thing, I'm like telling your story. And then did you text me like a warning? You were like, hey.
I texted both of you guys.
What did it say?
I was like, hey, just so you guys know, you might not recognize me this morning. just a little warning. You might not recognize me this morning. My eyes were pretty swollen.
Your whole face was pretty swollen, dude. Oh my goodness, your eyes, you had big creases in the corner of your eyes because there was so much edema that the tissue was like pressed together and you had these like creases on either side.
I woke up feeling I was like, oh, my eyes are swollen. Okay. I'm gonna pull up my camera and look at myself. Just don't be surprised. You're gonna look weird. I opened it. I was like, holy shit! It's way worse than I could have expected. From my forehead down to the bottom of my cheeks, just all swollen.
Like a different person.
Yeah.
Like Eric Stoltz mask.
Yeah.
Man, that was intense.
It wasn't Grant with a swollen face. It was just another guy.
Yeah, it really was. It was trippy.
It took a couple days for that swelling to go away too. And so it was funny because we came here with we had booked a little bit longer than we would normally book to make an episode. But the first night in the tree stand, we
got
experienced the
out.
deluge and the lightning. So we lost a day of hunting. Second day, it was like, well, we're not hunting tonight. Grant's been stung by the wasp, so we lost another night. So the days worked out actually pretty good. But even when the swelling went down, then you had like light, not quite a black eye, but both eyes had like sort of like a purple circle around them. Now you look great, but you still have that dot.
I got the stinger.
Yeah.
Stinger dot. I'm going to get a tattoo of that.
The other thing that's been really funny to watch is like there is definitely some PTSD.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything that buzzes by you, your reaction is like an overreaction.
You should have seen when a moth landed on my phone last night in the bedroom.
And when you have seen those red wasps, like when we were filming yesterday and you were just like, you told me at one point, you were like, I just saw a red wasp and I said, you know what? I got to get the shot. And you just did it anyway. And I was so proud of you because you were pretty nervous about anything buzzing for a while. Yep. Understandably,
Just got to get out of Texas alive.
Yeah, he's been carrying that extra EpiPen just in case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's one left. We told Jared today we'd leave it, but not until we're on our way out.
I'm really curious when I get back home, like to see what happens when I get stung by something. if I get a response
Curious
like
is a nice way to put that.
that. Yeah.
that. Because the EMT, and I think you guys were saying it too, that you can develop sensitivity to things if you've been stung
That's been
recently.
my
I was stung a month ago by a bee, and then my ankle swelled up.
So I wonder if that was a sensitization event for you.
It also stung. What's the nerve that you were telling me?
Oh,
that stung me?
you have, all those nerves are going through there, but it sounded like it got real close to your ocular because the way you described your vision, I was like, man, a little swelling on that. Like,
Yeah, because they say like the weight of a dime is enough to cause significant impingement of like a enervation of a nerve. Like it doesn't take much, a little bit of extra pressure.
I hope my skin was really sensitive for the next couple days.
Yeah,
My whole body.
that's how you became
The wasp. Or Lil Wasp.
Yeah, or your rap name, Lil Wasp. Oh man, I just it makes you realize how much you care about somebody, like something like that. It's like, wow, we're
Really grateful to have the three of you guys there. Yeah, it was amazing.
wow.
well, I think it was so early in the trip too that we all just were like, all right, we're a family now.
Yeah,
like this is it. So we had that instant gel. I mean, we were already getting along, but then like,
Big bonding experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it turned out the way it should. Everybody's still alive.
Yeah.
Everybody's healthy and relatively happy.
The episode's going to be awesome I can't wait for the people listening to get to see the show and to see this place too.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately they won't get to see Grant because he was on the other side of the camera. So only I get to have the photo.
Maybe you can post that on
Yeah,
social.
yeah, we
yeah
might
when
put
the
it side
episode
by
comes
side.
out.
Ooh, that's not a bad idea. Put a little. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we were showing Mr. Bamberger and Joanna the pictures yesterday, and it was so funny watching Mr. Bamberger look at you and then look at the
He was
picture.
like,
and
oh my
look back
God.
at you.
Yeah, I think before he left, he came up to me and he was like, are you the one that got bit? And I was like, yep. And he's like, well, you can take that home with you. Like, we don't give out awards here.
Oh, man.
That's Mr. Bamberger right there.
We don't give out awards here. So good. Well, Jared, yeah, it's been awesome, man. I'm really, I hope to get to do some things with you in the future. Anytime you want to come up to Maine.
I look forward to it. We've got family up in that area, so I know my wife would be really happy.
Yeah, I hope she gets to hear this. And if she's listening, Sarah, thank you you've been amazing holding down the fort while Jared's been working with us all week, and he's been busy.
We pushed him pretty hard.
Pushed him pretty hard, yeah, exactly. And if Thorborn gets to hear this one day, your dad was awesome this week. So
Yeah, well,
thanks
no,
for
I
it.
appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been great to kind of give you guys a perspective of Texas that isn't the norm, right? And especially for people that are so far in terms of distance away from Texas. You kind of hear it's like the Wild West, and then when we talk about exotic ranching and stuff, a lot of it is the Wild West, but when you get down to the grassroots of it and you find places like this.
Grassroots. See what you did there.
You like that? And there's a lot more of these now.
Yeah.
We're not the only nonprofit out there that's trying to restore land, and trying to raise funds to restore land too. And so it's been great to share the message. And COVID's been really hard on me personally. Not that I ever leave the ranch a whole lot, but I'm normally talking to kids and landowners. So tour guide Jared burns off all of that, all of that dumb energy I just have in my system from being a male. And so it's been fantastic having you guys out here to get some of that energy out of my system.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All of this.
All of this. Oh, man. As somebody with just a small holding, a little over 30 acres, not much, but you were talking to me recently saying that you're seeing more, that originally the people who wanted to come out here and consult with you guys were holders of huge tracts of land, but you're seeing more and more of these small holdings and people going, well, what can I do here? And one of the things that I really have taken away from this place is, we talked about it a bit last night, that it's not like there's some boundary where the system ends at the edges of this property, but at some level there kind of is in a way too. And I see that I'm inspired for what I can do on a smaller scale. And, encouraging more diversity, encouraging. Also, I feel more inspired to cut because my land is choked out from, after the logging efforts that have happened there wasn't anybody to go in and restore it. So now I feel like it's okay to get in there and really get aggressive because the long-term impacts are going to be so beneficial, and I burn wood anyway. So
yeah. No, it really comes down to what's your landscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what should be there, and how do you make it the most beneficial, not just for your enjoyment and your nature presence, but you gotta make money, right? Or you have to manage the land in a way that costs money, and so there's got to be some kind of break-even effect. And in Central Texas, those landowners are starting to work together. Every time we see a ranch split up, let's say 1,000 acres gets split into 50 homes. Well, now instead of one person in charge of that 1,000 acres going, oh man, it's just too much work, why even bother? They can go, oh well, there's a bunch of us out here now, and if we all kind of follow a similar, it doesn't have to be the same game plan, but a similar one, we all benefit. Mother Nature benefits. And so a forest in Maine, a forest in California, a swamp in Florida, just think about your system and then think about what you can do for that system and what that system can then do for you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, man. If people want to check out Bamberger Ranch or they want to make a donation to the ranch and to what's happening here, where do people go?
BambergerRanch.org.
Easy.
Yep.
Thanks so much, man.
Hey, absolutely. It's been a lot of fun, guys.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.